Well, welcome back. My name is Jim Kaseman. And we left off talking about, that we've been talking about quite a few weeks back now, talking about Jesus, his crucifixion, his death, his burial, and his resurrection, and how he fulfilled the feasts of the law, the feast of Israel rather, and then the burnt offerings. And we talked about that and a few other things. But then we also came back here in last session and decided to go back to the covenant, the blood covenant. And in light of what we've learned now in the past few months, I guess, time goes fast, let's take some of the stuff that we've learned and let's come back and let's apply the blood covenant to the things that we've learned about Jesus and his crucifixion, his death, going to hell, being resurrected, and all of that. And so then we were in Genesis 15 the last session and just briefly touched on that for those entire chapter. And so then we found out that God had to cut covenant with God the Son when he became the sinless man. Now, Abraham was not a sinless man, but Abraham was in covenant with God through God the Son, just like I have been redeemed with God through Jesus. I couldn't go to the cross. I had the nature of sin, but Jesus was sinless. So he stood in for me, just like God the Son stood in for Abram. That's about the easiest way to explain that. All right. So then we come to the blood covenant, and let's just look at some of the steps that the Hebrew men cut or participated in order to cut a blood covenant with one another. And of course, this is why Abram was very familiar with blood covenant. And you don't see just certain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps listed, but if you're familiar with blood covenant, you will immediately recognize, whoa, they're talking about blood covenant. They just did this, they just did that. And so that's why it's so familiar. It's good to be familiar with it. Now, in the new blood covenant could also be called the Great Exchange, because in the new blood covenant, everything that God is and ever has and ever will have, let's put it this way. God becomes everything that we are so that we could become everything that he is. The Great Exchange. And we see that in this first step. I have it listed as the first step, but anyway, and the Hebrew men would exchange their coats or their robes, because the coat or the robe represented them. And so I give you my coat, you give me your robe, They would exchange coats. And what they're saying is, I'm giving you all of myself, my total being, and my life. I'm pledging it to you. Now, under the new blood covenant, we see in Isaiah 64, verse 6, Jesus, he took our robe of self-righteousness, which is as filthy rags, Isaiah 64 and verse 6. And then he clothed us with his garment of salvation and his robe of righteousness, Isaiah 61 and verse 10. So Jesus offered up his entire being. He went to the cross voluntarily and gave up his life voluntarily, his whole life, everything for us. God did that. Jesus is God. And so God was on the cross giving up his whole life just for us so that we, in exchange, could receive his life. Wow. And so that is totally awesome. It was something else. I know when I was reflecting back on the Bible study where they introduced us to Jesus back in April 4th of 1972, and I'll never forget. They shared the gospel just like we did now, and so now, Jim, do you want to ask Jesus to come into your heart? See, now I really didn't understand that. I had the nature of sin, according to Ephesians 2:1. I was dead spiritually, and my destiny was hell. But now I have an opportunity to ask Jesus into my heart and change that. I could become part of the family of God and go to heaven. And so I asked Jesus to come into my heart, along with my wife that night. And it was by faith. We didn't feel anything. And matter of fact, they came around and said, no, there was 14 of us neighbors that showed up, and all of us asked Jesus to come into our heart. They did one by one. They came around. They came to me and they said, Jim, did you pray the prayer and ask Jesus to come into your heart? And I said, yeah. Well, where is he? I don't know. I never read the Bible. My mother never read Bible studies to me at home or anything like that. So I didn't understand all this Christian stuff. So they had to explain it all over again. And everybody else must have needed to hear it too, because they did that. And so again, they said, now it's by faith, Jim. If you ask him to come in your heart, it's by faith. Well, Kathleen and I, neither one of us had any feelings, and I like to get excited. But so we went home that night. Didn't feel anything. Wednesday, nothing. Thursday, I come out of the bedroom into the kitchen for breakfast, and my wife greeted me. Now, she didn't say good morning. This time she said something different. I came into the kitchen, and I said good morning, and she said, Jim, you're not cussing anymore. That's how foul my mouth was. And when she said that, I'm an adult now, I'm not a child. I'm 29 years old. But something inside of me stirred. And I knew that Jesus was in my heart because I asked him to come into my heart. And how he got in there, I don't know, but he was in there. And you know, everything flipped just like that. I literally exchanged robes. I mean, I no longer was dead spiritually. I realized I was alive spiritually. I'd taken on the nature of Jesus, life. I no longer was dead. I no longer had the nature of Satan. I had switched. He took my robe and I took his. And I'm not kidding you. From that moment forth, it was totally different for Kathleen and I. I mean, I come out of a life of drugs, alcohol, and everything that goes with it. But I'm telling you, it was like that day, Thursday morning, we started reading our Bibles, and it was like Jesus was talking to us. And I'm telling you, that's the way it's been. That's the way it's been since 1972. I pick up the Word of God, and I know it's Jesus talking to me. I've picked up his life. And we began to experience miracles. We led more people to the Lord than you can shake a stick. I mean, everybody we ran into, it was just like we had something that we'd never had before, and everybody else is going to have it too. And that's the way it's been. And it's been a wild ride ever since then. The great exchange. Well, then, they also then exchanged belts. Now, that's not the belt that holds up your pants. That's the belt that holds all of their armor in place, whether it be a sword or a dagger or spear, whatever it might be. Spears that they would throw in those years and different things. I mean, the shields, they'd have shields, just like the Roman soldiers. They'd have the shields, and this would hold the shield in place. This belt would hold all of their armor in place. And so they exchanged belts. Now, what that signified was, or what they were really saying to each other was, here is my strength and my ability to fight. If anyone attacks you, they're attacking me. Your battles are my battles and mine are yours. I will fight with you. I will help defend you and protect you. Well, in the new blood covenant, God has clothed me with his armor. Ephesians 6, verse 10 through 18. God's strength, his power, his ability are in me. 1 John 4:4. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. God's inside of me. And then if you read Psalms chapter 91 and all 16 verses, my goodness. You talk about the great exchange. I had nothing to offer to God except myself. And then he, in exchange, gives me all that he has, all of his armor, so that I can be protected in every way. Oh, my goodness. So we're running pretty close to the end of this session, and we will definitely pick this up in the next session and just see what we have received in exchange for yielding ourselves to him and what we have received in exchange from him. So be blessed again in everything that you just set your hands to do, and we'll see you in the next session.